Let us restart our final session, concluding session. And instead of having a roundtable only with the speakers, we decided to involve also the public with the questions and answers to all the speakers. And I would say to start with the questions, first of all, to Miriam and to Professor Bonaccorso, because they were the speakers of our morning centers, and then we will go back to the questions that were put forward yesterday. So Linda Roberta will read these questions.
Prova. Ok. Allora. Arrivo, ecco. Per Miriam Camerini.
How do you reconcile the image of God of the armies like as the God of peace? How can we reconcile the image of God as a merciful God with all his clear that loves all his animals, all his creatures, that kills also goats and asks for animal sacrifices? Can you hear me? So, well, clearly this image of the tetragram that is associated to this noun tsava that stands for army. In modern army, tsava is the army. In fact, in modern Hebrew, it's one of the thresholds on which various conversations are countered against. One of the possible images is multitude, abundance, a concept that is fundamental when we read the Bible, and also in a certain understanding of Judaism. We see this love for a multitude. We start with the fact that the spiritual guide of Jewish communities is Rav, what we call the rabbi. At the times of Jesus, Rav is the root of many. Rav Arbe, Abba. We read it also in the morning. And so there is this idea of this multiplicity of the quantity. The rabbi, the Rav, is such because he can understand, meaning that he can welcome the variety of humanity, of existence. And so we find this value of a lot of tzevot. Therefore, notwithstanding the troops, notwithstanding this military aspect, there is also another interpretation that relates to quantity. So the God of many, of everything, of the whole. And there are many examples. There is some of the city, for example. One is negative, one is positive. The negative example is Genesis 11. The construction of the first city, what we know as the Tower of Babel. In fact, when we read the verses in Genesis 11, we see, in fact, a Migdal, a tower, but also an Ir, whereas the first time in the Bible we find the term city. And there, the humans once again make a mistake. They go in error, because the divinity is the first commandment of all that was given to the first couple. To the first two chapters of Genesis is the fruit. You bear fruit, and urvu, which is the same fruit connected to rav. So multiply yourselves. That we translate grow and multiply yourself. They become many of you. And this humanity, immediately after the flood, instead of scattering horizontally as it should on the earth to populate it, it's positioned vertically, trying to create this incestuous tower where each wants to stand on top of the other. Instead of being human, being many, they want to become like a deity. They want to reach up on the above. And so the divinity scatters this by confounding, by mixing all the languages. And this mixture of languages and cultures, an antidote to the evil, to the arrogance represented by the Tower of Babel. Thus, the positive aspect is we found in Nineveh, in the book of Jonah, a book of redemption, of repentance, of teshuvah. the capacity to re-seeing one's mistakes, where the city of Nineveh, initially condemned for its wickedness, is saved by God, we believe, because the story ends before his teshuvah, his ability to repent, takes place precisely because there are many. And so the fact of this many, of this multitude, is an element of salvation, of deliverance. So meaning the quantity. Regarding the question of the sacrifices, I would just briefly answer it because I already took a lot of time. It would also deserve much more in-depth reflection. However, there are two approaches in the Middle Ages, 13th century. Maimonides, one of the most important philosophers and thinkers, and also medical doctors in Spain and then in Egypt, Jewish, of course, who says that sacrifices is a temporary means that granted by the Lord as a concession, as a derogation to the people of Israel at biblical times, which it said necessarily has a limited time frame. Two destructions of the two temples of Jerusalem in the 5th century before Christ and then the first after Christ are in fact not so much a punishment for our sins as interpreted by rabbinic literature, but rather something that was supposed to happen because the expedient of the sacrifice was limited in time so that one could detach oneself and would stop making human sacrifices and what are idolatries days. So it's the least worst solution. So Maimonides, almost a contemporary, says that sacrifice is something substantial, meaning that we should offer ourselves as sacrifice, and the animal, even the elements from the vegetable world, we also have oils and others, is a replacement and by proxy, meaning I should offer myself. It's a way, a Hasidic teacher says in the 19th century, says that the sacrifice is a constant control of myself. I am stand before the animal looks at me and says, maybe you should be the one to be offered. There is another question from Miriam. So, wholeheartedly thanking Miriam for her lecture, I was very much impressed by the cub of the lion closed in the cistern. Without an instinct for evil, we can have no beginning of life. Not even a chicken will make an egg. Don't you think there could resonate with the vision of the Buddha of the cessation of suffering as a cessation of being born, or conversely, the absence of suffering? Is it automatically absence of birth? Yes. Yes, I can say nothing more. Obviously, everything that exists is doomed to suffer. And naturally, we spoke a lot about these days about the passion sentiments of that flowing from our hearts. Obviously, this is a whole. It's part of a whole, and only within suffering, meaning that in being in life, there is life. It's part of life. Maybe there's a question of Ghesce to Bonaccorso.
Per Bonaccorso.
C'è una domanda di Ghesce per Bonaccorso. Aspetta. Va bene, va bene, va bene, va bene.
God. So Ghesce, Gelek wanted to know, since God has a nature of love and compassion, and God, according to the Christian vision, and the question is addressed to Christianity, since we are created by God, God created us, God has a nature of love and compassion, how is it possible that we experience suffering? I think from my perspective, it's a contradiction. I wanted to know more about this. Thank you. This question is for Professor Bonaccorso. Yes. Thank you very much for this question. Here we face a very strong problem we have to address. This has been said for some time. When we say that God is love, well, it's unquestionable from a Christian perspective. But be careful when we say that God created the world. We think this.
Purtroppo diversi autori ce l'hanno fatto pensare come
God created the world means he is the cause of the world. God cause of the world. And this notion, there is an abundance of literature. All these books are interesting, but also dangerous. Creating the world in a vision that is not physical, scientifical, but rather in from a religious dimension does not mean being cause of the world. It means only having, if seen from a logical perspective, it is implying a relationship. It is a relationship. And this relationship is not a cause-effect relationship. Creating the world simply means that the first act with which God wants to get in touch with the world, and this contact, that is, it's a redeeming contact. So we should imagine God as in this modality. I am drowning because I don't know how to swim. I'm in the water. Someone sees me, and they dive into the water and they save me. And this is God. God did not create the water and the fact that I am drowning. God is the one who comes and rescue me, or my neighbor. And we should pay attention also to the fact that was the first point. This is the second important point. When we say that God is almighty, well, we must be careful, because if we read the Gospels, the famous temptations of Jesus, both in the version of Matthew and Luke, are three temptations for power, and Jesus refuses of exerting power, of being subjugated to power, and to ascribing power to God. Consistently with this, when he's on the cross and he is told, come down from the cross, he does not. God is not omnipotent, almighty, in the sense as we understand power, this omnipotency. God is weak in this respect. His power is only love. Love, only love. It's more similar to a father. We call him father, or a mother that cannot solve all the problems with a magic wand. When we say that he is close to everything, it does not mean omnipotent as we conceive power. From this conception, this led to so many other discriminations, the hierarchy, like the clergy is above the laity, and so on. It is a deprivation when, in fact, God in the New Testament presents himself as a humble one who loves his neighbor. And his power is only called love. He cannot do more than this, and he does not want to do more than this. So this is important. It's as if we were in a condition, certainly he did not want it, negative condition, and to a certain extent he wants to bring in a positive one. We should say that God should be seen not so much that she created chronologically, but rather he is the one who awaits us in a life without suffering, in a life without death, in a life with no discrimination, in a life with no conflicts, serene, peaceful life, milk and honey, in where he helps us to reach this final state, this life. God did not cause the world as we understand it. Otherwise, this leads to an underlying error. This is not how Jesus Christ describes himself. He does not descend from the cross. As he does not descend from the cross, according to our criteria of ecclesial pastoral care, we should say that God, Jesus Christ, in that moment, if he could come down from the cross, and he did not, he made a huge pastoral mistake. If he wanted to show that he was God, what was the best way than descending the cross? But he does not. He does not descend the cross. And the moment when his so-called power is exerted is such that it can be undescribed very differently. Nobody witnessed the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This is the most important thing. The outcome of everything is resurrection, but nobody witnessed the resurrection. This is for the weak persons. God is weak for the weak ones. He loves the weak ones and he loves everyone because we are all weak. I think it's very important to change the identity card of God.
Grazie. Sì.
Can you ask the second question? Another question for Professor Bonaccorso from Ghesce. It's the second question. The second question from Ghesce to Imam Mocci. God, if God is one, how many gods are there? If God is one and created the world and the universe, who has created God? Thank you very much for your question. Thank you for the teachings that we received from you yesterday. In Islam, there is the doctrine of God's unity. God has a name, but he also has 99 names. There are the 99 names of Allah, divine attributes that believers are called to follow. And then there is God's name, Allah, which is not only the name of a Muslim God, it's the name of God. Allah is the Arabic name for God. Allah, Al-Hile, in Italian would be, oh God, one God. This is why Christians live in the Middle East and speak Arabic, they say Allah. Now, there is another very interesting question in the Islam doctrine. God is one, but there are many worlds according to a cyclical doctrine of the worlds. Miriam said it very well. Man before the deluge, and then after God creates different men with different hearts. And then on the topic, I'd like to tell you something about a tradition, a journey that the prophet does. It's a journey throughout the night. The prophet from his home goes to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem to the heavens to get to contemplate God. After this journey, Gabriel, the angel, shows the prophet a theory.
Una sequela, una carovana. La carovana è una sequela
a caravan. And the prophet tells that he saw this caravan with many safe. In each safe there was a world, and each world there was a Muhammad like he was. So when he left and when he went back during this night journey, there are different traditions to be considered. According to one, there was a leaf falling when he left, and the leaf hasn't fallen yet. And then there is another tradition presenting the same image with a water jug. What I'm trying to say is Allah is God. To overcome language barriers, God is the essence. And the essence is by definition unique. But it's not a unique component that is one. It's a uniqueness that contains everything. Yesterday, we had a conversation on universal. Universal includes all, but it means also versus unum, toward unity. And can you clarify who created God? Allah is the creator. Is in creation. Allah is not created. Is he permanent? It doesn't change. The divine essence is what is part of his unchanging nature. It's not subject to the becoming, at least to the traditional doctrine. What is permanent is what resides in Allah's essence. It's just joking and saying, what about eradicating suffering? Do we need to eradicate this God who is the cause of our suffering? Clearly, no. I mean, first of all, it's an honor to speak with such a great master in order to eradicate suffering. The masters teach that we need to seek reconciliation with God's unity. Thank you very much, Master. Thank you. If other speakers want to contribute, please feel free to do it. We are receiving so many questions, but if you want to answer the Ghesce, please let me try to say one thing.
Miriam e poi Bonaccorso.
Scusa, non avevo visto. C'è una...
There is a conversation in Talmud. It's a treaty on tribunals, the juridical aspect, where masters converse whether it's good or bad that human beings were created. They agree in saying that it's bad. It would have been better for human beings not to be created. And then they add a comment that says, but since they have been created, they should go and do the best that they can. Professor Bonaccorso? Yes, just a comment on what you said. This phrase is part of the Greek tradition, the biblical tradition, what you have just said. As for who has created God, I think that when we talk about these topics, we are referring to a notion of time that the physics don't have. It's a metaphysical notion of time that is based on a naive approach. For example, if the theory of relativity says that time is created by the universe is not time, it's not the time. The space and time dimension is part of the universe itself. There is no time before. From this perspective, if that is the beginning of the universe. Unfortunately, the audio of the speaker is not very clear. So, before the universe, we cannot talk about the time. If theoretical physics says that we can say what it comes before, what about God? I mean, who created God? Time is relative. It's not absolute. Light speed is more absolute. Time is relative. It's not an inner quality. I'm not in time. The distinction between permanent and change is about the basic cells. I mean, there are no permanent points interacting. It's a whole from the physics perspective, acting in space and time. Based on this new cosmology physics, some Christian theologians are writing books on contistics and theology, because certain theology ideas are based on a metaphysics that was based on a physics depicting all visions of time and space. Newton is no longer valid. All new theories overcome this vision. And the foundation, and same applies to the foundation on metaphysics used to interpret faith. But faith goes beyond interpretations. But if we consider the doctrine level, we need to update it. We need to consider that theologians of the time, they were proposing advanced theories for the time, metaphysics based on the physics that at the time was considered relevant. This physics is no longer valid, the metaphysics is no longer valid, and same goes for the interpretation that we have on theology. Same applies to time and space as for God, because otherwise we would have to say there are three singularities, the beginnings, phenomena that are not under laws, the beginning of the universe, the end of the universe. These go beyond any interpretation, rational science, physics. And especially when we talk about God, we need to be careful in using these categories.
Ci sono Io volevo fare
I have a question for Ghesce. Ghili?
La mia domanda.
My question is the following. In some of the texts of Dhosena, there is a discourse on 4 times: the past, the present, the future. And then it is taught that when it is in the state of the nature of mind, there is this 4th time, a condition that goes beyond the time. Can you please explain that?
Thank you. Yeah, according to the Dzogchen tradition, and we talk of the 2 different aspects. One is the reflection side, one is the nature aspect.
Nature aspect?
Yeah, okay. Nature state.
Allora, secondo il dottor Chen, questo si spiega... Forse vi segue dopo. Secondo lo Dzogchen, questo è spiegato secondo 2 aspetti. Uno si spiega tramite lo studio e la riflessione, E l'altro aspetto si spiega o si capisce tramite l'essere nello stato naturale.
So according to the reflection, the manifestation of the Rigpa, nature state, then we can say the past, present, and the future, three different things. And then reality aspect and the nature is without like timeless state. There's no timing. So that way, and we say four, different aspects. One is timeless state. The natural state is the single, which is the completely is free from the cause and the condition, without any kind of form and any substance, and the total is free from and a pure and a perfect. That way, it doesn't have the time, That way, it's a timeless state. It just give the name of the four times, but there's no reality. There are four times there. One is the timeless state. That means beyond the cause and the condition.
Allora, secondo lo studio e la riflessione, che sono un modo di manifestare del Rigpa, della comprensione della consapevolezza, e che spiega lo stato naturale. In questo caso si parla dei tre tempi, cioè uno riflette, uno capisce e uno diventa consapevole. Mentre quando si parla dell'essere nello stato naturale, che è la realtà della natura, questo è quello che Andrea ha parlato del stato senza tempo. Allora, questo stato senza tempo è lo stato naturale, è singolo. Scusa, sì, prima abbiamo parlato di singolarità, mi pare il professore, non ha nessuna causa, non ha condizioni, senza forma e senza sostanza, è totalmente puro e perfetto. E si può dire in effetti che è senza tempo, se ne parla come il quarto tempo, però questo è solo una convenzione, perché non rientra più nella temporalità, diciamo, è completamente al di là del tempo. Ok? Va bene?
Ci sono altre
Do we have other reflections or questions? Otherwise, we can continue with our questions. Yes, of course, questions from the floor. If you have questions.
Dov'è
Sì, grazie.
It's a question for Miriam. It's a clarification.
Mi ha colpito molto.
At first, I was really moved by what you said about Cain. Cain was full of rage and his face fell off. So can you please clarify that? What is the reference as for the face? I mean, yes, he's full of rage and he is armed, inner disarmament. And you also explained what Jesus, the deity, was suggested, but he remains armed and his face fell. What about the relation between arms, weapons, and face? Because if his face was to remain the same, he would have been disarmed. So what is the reference? And thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you to all the speakers.
Grazie.
Thank you for your question. Yes, actually, the faces are very often plural in Hebrew. This is the first time when this word is used in the Bible. The panim, that's the word for face. Im indicates the masculine plural in Hebrew.
In generale.
So, in general, it's plural. Panim is the face, but it's also the inner dimension, because in Italian volto also means toward. So there is this both dimensions, the inner and the outer dimensions, are present. Volto, face, but also the inside. In Hebrew, there is the similarity between inner and outer. And the second, this assonance. And the second notion, this face falling, is present in other Bible tales. It's another example when his mask falls off. And once again, we are told that his face is frozen. I don't know if I would make the same connection that you did. This notion of armed, disarmed, this is the title of today's conference. And yes, of course, the reference is good, but I wouldn't connect this with the text. And this is what I've tried to do in the morning. For me, it's kind of the opposite. Cain in this tale is like a child who is disarmed. And God explains to Cain what he's feeling. It's a sort of consolation. It's a God who tries to find a way out, a solution to a form of evil that is necessary. I'm not trying to trivialize what you're saying. It's actually the opposite. It's an archetype. This conflict is because there is a need, the otherness, to quote Levinas. If there is otherness in the world, brothers and sisters, that's the question. This is what poses problems on the outside. The fault of able is to exist. The fact that there is someone else besides me is what we need to learn to manage. For example, when we are on the train, I want to put my bag and the other person wants to sit. We are both right in this case. This is a very basic, trivial example, but it's the same notion at the foundation of many words. I am here, and then there is someone else gets to me. So I wouldn't say armed, disarmed, and I don't feel that in this case, disarmed is interpreted in a positive way. We need to be armed, we need to be protected, we need to have boundaries that are what allows me to have a relationship with others. But if we are not armed, if we don't have a skin, a protection, what I showed you before, we couldn't have relationships. Relationships happen according to certain boundaries. We can't touch one another without boundaries. So there's this need for a face, for a mask. And that goes back to what you said. This is how God is superior. He knows how much to give to the world. Kabbalah, the mystics, Fatsinsum, God is reduced, is concentrated, is focused. Very often God withdraws from creation so that creation is possible. It's not that deity that is withdrawing. It's actually it's a reduction in volume, to say so, but it's an intense presence that allows the otherness to exist. So we have to do the same. Imitatio Dei, we need to learn from God to make room for otherness.
Thank you for this further explanation. I started from the assumption that anger is an inner weapon for each one of us. a human being who is angry. He's like a mind that's about to explode. So that's why I was thinking of an eventual disarmament and how is it connected with this aspect of the faces. This was the essence of my question. And I think that when I'm angry, I enter the practical aspects of life. When I am angry, I am explosive. And so I really need an inner disarmament by using the tools that I am given by religion, by philosophical thoughts that is of support. However, this was the notion, I mean, the weapon that, in my opinion, is a very powerful weapon that each one of us should try to not to let explode when we feel it is mounting. Thank you very much. So, does someone have a comment, a reflection to share on this last comment from the audience? Okay. So, if there are no other questions among the speakers or to share, let's pass on to other questions. We have about 30 questions still to go. I'm sorry, we'll have to select just a few.
In realtà, scusate, mi inserisco dare conto.
Un attimo,
sì? Ecco.
I think Svamini wanted to say something.
No, scusatemi.
Yes, this reflection on the faces.
Un'immagine che nella tradizione vista l'iconografia
Reminds me of the iconography of Buddha. The audio is not perfect of the speaker. There's some. Can you hear me? So the speaker asks. Those who are listening to the earphones don't hear very well. Can you hear me better? Yes, asks the speaker. So this depiction, of course, I don't want to make too many parallelisms, but just a thought that came to my mind. We have this image of Buddha, this depiction of the female deity, that is basically in a very cruel action that is killing a demon called Maisha, which is also one of his names. And this depiction, this ferocious depiction, in fact, is very protective, because what she is destroying is a demon whose specific feature is to assume many different shapes and faces. So this is an image that came to me of the various tendency of the various forces, positive or not, that or less positive, that each one of us have to conquer, take on different features. So they deceive us, they deceive our minds. And the image of Durga is that, translated, it also means the one who is difficult to win over. So it also entails the challenge of overcoming evil, of defeating evil. And so I just like to share with you this image because I heard this closeness and this reference to these shapes of the evil one. Also, although in Hinduism we don't have an ontological reality of evil, but everything that is opposed to the Dharma takes on often deceiving shapes and forms that we are not able to identify. This also entails our ability to identify and to see this disguise and to see the less positive aspects, the negative one. Thank you. If there are no remarks from the speakers, we can move on. Yesterday there were 2 or 3 questions, which unfortunately we didn't have the time to read. Mostly for Imam Mocci, but we may also extend it to the other religions. There are 2, I'll put them together. The question comes from the experience of one of our listeners on Zoom who said that the people who follow, the question is, women, what is the role of women in your religion? And the other of another person, the other question is, the intellectual effort you spoke about, is it also addressed to female subjects, to women? Well, since there are two questions, I will try to make a brief answer. The second answer to the second question is yes. God gifted the intellect in the meaning, in the sense that we tried to explain yesterday, to man understood as a gender, human, as a human being, to humankind, mankind understood as humankind. And so women have the possibility of spiritual fulfillment just as men do. I want to seize the occasion to say also this thing. Just imagine how the profane mentality changes and corrupts the meaning of words. Today, the term self-fulfillment is different. Achievement is considered completely different as it was before, whereas there were some words that preserved their traditional meaning. So the intellectual effort that leads to spiritual realization or self-fulfillment leads to the possibility, the opportunity, which is not a right, but an opportunity addressed to all. I don't remember the meaning. It was yes or not, but this is my answer. The question of the role of woman is clearly a question that is very important today, but maybe it is not strictly related to our theme. We could perhaps have another conference specifically dedicated to this issue. I would like to answer with an Islamic tradition, mentioning the Islamic tradition, not to delve into or spark off a big debate. It would be misleading. The teaching we receive is that all humankind is born with something in their heart, with a, let's call it like a sin in their heart, just except for Miriam and so Mary, the mother of Jesus, and her son Jesus. This bears testimony to the importance that the holiness of Mary, and a role in the Islamic tradition. Our master, the Imam, wrote a beautiful, there is a surah of the sacred Quran devoted to Miriam, Surah Miriam, it's called. Our Imam wrote a commentary on this text where it actually underlies this holiness of this woman that is capable of alternating word and speech and silence, even when she is accused, denigrated, and she can alternate words and silence to fulfill spiritual victory that brings peace. It brings Jesus in the world that for us represents a prophet. He is a prophet for us. That's to answer without, of course, leading up to another conference. So, okay, so we have another idea. We have a theme for another interreligious conference. Other comments, other remarks? No. None. Okay. So we can move on to another question for Giorgio Bonaccorso. Thank you, Father Bonaccorso, for the accuracy and the depth of your presentation, not believing in God, but being in God. How much meditative experience understood as the practice of meditation, Christian practice meditation, can help us feel God in prayer? And how can we feel God in the liturgical experience that often is just an exterior element and that is representational? Thank you for this question. Just a brief forward, since the theme is inner disarmament, I Of course, when I speak about the immersive aspect, I understand it as an inner disarmament, all the more disarmament, because it entails also the outer aspect. So the image of the face, in fact, is very, very interesting in this respect. So being in God. I would like to say something. It happened that I asked some young person. I know many young persons who do not believe, but these say who believe in God. And I realized that often they understand it as follows. I believe in God, they say, means interpreting events also in the light of the faith. Personal events, events that touched us, touched them particularly. However, there is a risk in this approach because why do you interpret it in the light of God? The risk is to fall into another doctrine. The church taught me a doctrine. According to this doctrine, we interpret the events that occur. And then naturally, since there is a wide range of doctrines nowadays, theological and pseudo-theological, of course, there are different interpretations. So all the aspect of the spirituality, for me, faith and spirituality should coincide, is to undertake a journey where through our emotions and reactions, one does not only know, but feels. So, in my opinion, there are some aspects. We have no time now, otherwise we'll have another lecture. The first point I would like to evidence is the answer of the faith in the light of the so-called universal sin, or original sin, rather, how it is called. You know, as you know, that known sin is not original, it's universal, because you know how psychologists define it, it's a delirium of omnipotence. Delirium of omnipotence is more or less strong, but we see it. So if the risk is to feel oneself as God, the attitude of faith is not that God exists like a big object. First thing, in fact, is to say, I am not God. I am not God. This is the first attitude we should have. Because when we say God exists, not as an immersion in God, but rather as a description, you know what happens? For any psychoanalyst would say, yes, God exists. It's me. I exist, so God exists, because I am God. And so the others are not God. So that we see the struggle against others. It's not me. Whereas immersion, by immersion, we know that I am not God. If God exists, the only possibility is not to look at him, is not to be him, is not to view him, it's just to inhabit him. Exactly like happens in real life. I am not life. I did not decide to be born, but I am in the biological social environments. I find myself in life, including human life. And being in it means being able to live, as in life. I live not because I know that I drink water, I live in water, thanks to water. This the same applies to spirituality. It's not a question of knowing, but of experiencing. And the only way to experience this, when we're talking about the whole, God is the whole, everything, the Almighty, it means being in it. One of the paths to follow is to remove the selfishness that makes us say to ourselves, I am God. So the starting point is, I am not God, is to say this. In Christian tradition, this is also called humbleness. Then there are other fundamental aspects. to develop an emotional, a series of emotions that enables us to feel things by feeling, not only knowing. This feeling can extend to more, it can expand. And then there's also another fundamental aspect. The speaker has some technical problems. So what is already happening is the possibility of perceiving the presence of God not as an object. This implies the activation of everything according to the trilogy, action, emotion, and the reaction intellect. All three should be activated because all three, including the intellect, are of much help in this process, of course. But we should try to develop the so-called uterine sentiment, because we perceive life, first of all, as a fetus, as being within, inside a uterus, within life. The second uterus becomes the world. The third is God. To be in, to be inside. Surprising. It is quite surprising from a sociological and historical perspective. Religions have tend to have a female fabric, but then ultimately they are masculistic. They have a masculine approach. The first images, sacred images, are female, and then they became macho, they became chauvinist. So at a level of experience, they are in the female, but then at the doctrinal level, they start to adopt a male chauvinist approach. And that is why I also underline very much the fact that we must not forget this deeply emotional and immersive nature of faith. However, I must say the most radical response to the questions I received cannot be given here by myself, but can only be what so many religious communities have done, especially those who lived before and apart from the great religions, the great monotheistic religions. I'm referring to African religions, the religions of Burkina Faso, for example. Apart from the fact that we are all Africans, that's where we all came from, because I think they encompass the tenets of all religions, Islamism, Judaism, Christianity. We should all learn a little bit from these religions that came before the others. In these religions, initiations consisted in opening up to the ability of being immersed in the social realm and the divine realm through a series of rituals that were very challenging, where fear, shame, joy, pleasure, even sexual aspects activated everything. Just think, for example, at the importance not only for Tantrism, but also the sexual aspect. The sexual aspect tells us at different levels of being inside, not only speaking of. That's why Christian traditions, where sexual aspect was penalized, there are many sexual metaphors to describe the mystical experience. Sometimes it is quite bewildering. So we should not be afraid of anything, actually. We should be able to undertake this journey, let's call it, of initiation, thanks to whereby we enter an experience that allows me to be inside, allows me to feel inside. And so I am pacified over and beyond the doctrines. So why do I underline this aspect? With the scientific, philosophical reflections that are coming to the fore today, we see I think we see a risk for all religions of insisting on the doctrine because they're flawed. The flaws, the objections are flawed. However, we can make reference not only to doctrines, but to in-depth experiences that concern all religions, because that is the main point. We can know so much about God, about Allah, about Buddha, but that's not the point. Unless we live, we feel, we drink the water. To know that H2O is a good thing is not enough. Unfortunately, all we can do is to answer with the need for a journey. Initiation is collapsing, we know what is happening. The last sacrament is called the sacrament of farewell. Well, it should be a sacrament to enter the community, whereas the young people are leaving, just a few are left, because it is an instructional form of initiation, made of catechism, made of doctrine. That doesn't work. The human being do not work that way, neither anthropologically nor religiously. It's a journey of experience. In fact, it was called the witness. Who was the witness? The witness is not the one who teaches theology, is the one who hands over his experience to the other person. And this leads also to the aspect of confessing one's faith. So, this is my answer. Thank you.
If you don't have comments, we can continue with the next question. The question is for Diana Petech. And if there are other answers, please feel free. One of the participants online is stating that everything that has been said today is very clear on a rational level, on the practical level, in the daily life, when we are stuck in traffic with our partner, children, when we worry for our health, financials, how can we exercise this inner peace, the practice, prayer, meditation, yoga? Do you think that they really have an influence on our interiority so that the encounter with everything that is part of the daily life is easier?
Grazie.
Thank you for the question. This is a crucial question. What should we do on a practical level? How can we use these wonders that we shared on a practical level? In the Buddhist tradition, we talk about practice, not theory. Theory means words. This is what Professor Bonaccorso just said. If there is no experience, transformational experience, knowledge by itself is great, but the life of the person is not changed, or at least there's only a change happening under certain conditions. If you are not in traffic with people, or with children, with your teenager kids, and so on. Marital relationship. That's where we can make the difference. If I am constant in my practice, for example, what I shared about selective cultivation of healthy seeds, but you may choose one of the wonderful means that we shared. If I do it not when I need, not when I am in traffic, when I am with people. No, I have to take the time in my life, space, time, a time that is sacred, even if it's a very Western notion. When I say sacred, I take this right to put off myself, say I won't be available for the next hour. This is how I cultivate my stability. This is how I cultivate my unity with the whole, according to my needs. And personally, I do it in different periods. It's not enough for me to listen to myself, and I need one practice session on that. Farmers know that planting the seeds is not enough. Trusting the process is not enough. Farmers know that seeds need water protection, small trees. They need a support because wind otherwise will break them. But that has to be done in a space that is not the one of the daily life. It's an act of life. Because I have received biological life, but it's not enough. Life needs to be cultivated. And we need to create the conditions for life to flourish and blossom. If I feel that my true core, my being in the world is only about attending a meeting in my building, driving in traffic, honestly, is it worth it? This is what I say about different period. There's the time for cultivation that allows me to change on an inner level, inner changes that allow me to overcome daily difficulties. But very often in my retreats, I say, it's a training. Let's train ourselves when, for example, the washing machine is not working, when I have a cold, because otherwise, when we get terrible news like a child dying or terrible disease, that won't be the time when we can cultivate our ability of being at the center. We need the cultivation. We would need the cultivation what we had done before, when the machine was broken, when the elevator was not working. Different times, yes, but we need to take the time to flourish. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to receive other contributions, especially because it's a very practical question. Just to conclude, we only have 15 minutes left. Yes, please. I'd like to make a comment on what you said. In all societies, there is a distinction between work time and celebration time. Why? It seems it's part of the DNA of human beings. In the time of the so-called celebration time, yes, we celebrate, but we also have rituals that are fundamental to create a sense of life. We may say that there is a time for life, a profane time, work time, which is important, but there is also need for interruption. This is anthropologists call liminality. A break in time, I access a different context where I work on the sense of life. But these are not intellectual experiences, as I said before. And this time is crucial for the rest of life. So if there is one thing that is important to live well, we need to have breaks from daily life, interruptions. Daily life is not to be sustained by itself. We have two big questions, living and giving a sense to life. We need two times, a time for life and a time during which we elaborate on the sense of life. The second time is crucial to life itself. So having interruptions, breaks, moments that all religions propose. Think of Fridays, Sundays, Saturdays. Each religion has a day to stop. These needs are part of the human genetics. If I may, I completely agree with what Diana Petech said. I'd like to say thank you. You were inspiring. Your contribution, all speakers were inspiring. I'd like to go back to what Professor Bonaccorso said. It's true that we need a preparation. So there are moments where we need to find a sacred time. But at the same time, I think that the ideal, the challenge is to have these moments throughout our life. Yesterday, someone said, hey, these are wonderful concepts, ideas, but there's this risk. One of the participants says that I want to have a revolution, being present in one's life. I don't think that being monks, being people seekers, a sense in life is less revolutionary than revolution itself. In today's world, praying is a revolution, is revolutionary in today's world. So having these moments, this is what yoga teaches. It's not about physical positions. Yoga is about living a unity with an idea of truth, sense. We may have different names or forms. But I think this is the key factor, the challenge. Living the yoga 25 per day, being in a state of yoga, being in a state of union. Of course, it's not easy because when rage takes on, rage is there. And we only have to try to take it down, slow down. When this wave of rage comes, we need to find the means to fight against it. So, of course, preparation is necessary, but we need to create these moments of practice, have these moments of practice, interiorization, and during our life. These are non-violent weapons that we have to fully live God, if we believe in God, or a fullness of sense, of meaning for people who don't believe in God or are seeking something. We use different languages, but as humans, we share sorrows, joys, we all do. Forms may change, but this is the true spirit uniting us, and it's a source of comfort. We are not alone in this journey. We know that there is someone else going through the same thing. This could be a source of help for the other person, but for us as well. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all. It was a very enriching meeting on a personal level. And yes, thank you.
Sì, prego.
I thank you both for these clarifications. And yes, I realized that I forgot one thing. It's not a separate space. It's a space that leaves a mark, that modifies the person, that has an impact on the person. The rest of the day, brings with them what the invisible change that happened one day after the other. And transformation, we see it in our life, in our days. It's not something that we do. We realize rather, okay, this before was disturbing to me, and now I feel open, generous. Our masters states that Buddha is within ourselves, the divine spark. We are Buddhas on a part-time basis, and we want to become Buddhas on a full-time basis. And I think this image is really good. Thank you. Yes, it is essential that for the law of neuroplasticity, the goal, yes, is transformation in one's life and one's relationships with others. This is why it's revolutionary. It leaves a mark. It's not a separate space or time. Miriam, Imam, Ghesce, if you want to add a comment. Daily life. What we bring in our daily life as a conclusion of today's conference.
I think it's wonderful, this conference. It's very meaningful for me, you know, this conference. I learn a lot, personally, different traditions, different, you know, experience and practice and meditation. So many things I learned. It's really, really interesting. Yes? Yeah.
Volevo dire che è stato meraviglioso per me, anche significativo, partecipare a questo, perché ho imparato molto anche a titolo personale riguardo le diverse tradizioni, a diversi tipi modalità di meditazione e di pratica che si svolgono.
So generally, the we talk about like I want to the religion, you know, different aspects, you know, the notion or understand the religion, and according to the Burn tradition, my tradition, the religion is not only we just believe or just pray for invisible some figures. The religion is completely we say unification of transmission, knowledge, blessing, and also the prayers, the rituals is completely combined. You know, the subject is really deep and the knowledge. So that way, and when we talk about like peace, happiness, you know, everything, and whatever we say, whatever we do, it is like, you know, generally to get the peace and happiness. Yes, that one, main thing. Okay.
Volevo parlare riguardo, diciamo, alla religione in generale, ma più precisamente posso parlare della mia religione, degli Yundrung, che ci sono questi aspetti diversi, che comunque la religione non è solo credere o di pregare a qualche essere invisibile, qualche entità, qualche potere invisibile, ma è piuttosto utilizzare questi mezzi per la propria trasformazione, questi mezzi che ci sono dati tramite la trasmissione di conoscenza, tramite i rituali da eseguire che funzionano in questo modo, e tutti questi diversi aspetti vengono combinati in modo di realizzare o di ottenere in se stessi questa profonda conoscenza. Ed è questo di cui abbiamo parlato questi giorni, questo è il modo di raggiungere o di ottenere o di realizzare la pace e la felicità.
So generally, it doesn't really matter. Yes, if we are believers or no believers, we believe in something in peace and happiness. So that is everybody's belief. We're sleeping for peace and happiness. We walk, talk, and whatever single activities what we do, the main goal is to get the peace and happiness. Yes, that is the main goal. You know, doesn't matter. So what I'm trying to say is the part of the math of the religion is the real, the like essence or the authentic, the method to how to achieve the peace and happiness within ourselves. So that way, of course, it's really important to understand, yes, and then so-called the integration and practice. So when you integrate your daily life into the practice of meditation or prayer, so it doesn't matter which way you believe and whatever you do, and then through this practice of meditation, and then you can find space, you can find real inner disarmament, peace and state of happiness. So that's, I think this is very important. Like example, conference like this, for me is really meaningful. So learning a lot of things, sharing a lot of things, knowledge, it's good. I think I will share that, generally, I think it's important. That especially the religion, that, religion is not only just belief, really seriously. Yeah. There's a knowledge aspect, there's transmission aspect, there's an initiation aspect, there's the blessing aspect, the ritual aspect, the prayer aspect. It's really, the kind of profound, the subject is really, really important. People talk about religions, also like differences, religious and religion, Religion is not necessarily to follow exactly the religion. There's different ideas. Mm-hmm. Also, religious know kind of the define what a religion is. Mm-hmm. I cannot define it like my religion. I have the different concepts, I have different ideas. So this is also really important to distinguish religious and the religion. I think that's my opinion. I think all people talk, the different explanation of the religion, this religion, that religion, this. So this is very important to clear, according to my tradition, what does the religion mean? Thank you.
Abbiamo parlato questi giorni parecchio dell'idea della religione o anche possiamo dire delle religioni, ma sorry, lost my page. Possiamo dire che il nostro argomento di pace e di felicità, questo, se uno sia un credente o non sia un credente, è qualcosa che tutti ricerchiamo, anche mentre dormiamo, camminiamo, parliamo, qualunque cosa facciamo, siamo tutti alla ricerca della pace e della felicità. E questo, la religione, presa in senso, essenziale, ci dà il metodo o i metodi per raggiungere questo obiettivo, perché tutti noi vogliamo la pace e la felicità in noi stessi. E la religione ci dà la comprensione tramite i metodi di come raggiungere questo in modo reale. Ci sono modi, poi ci sono le modalità, che sono quelli della pratica giornaliera, delle preghiere, della meditazione, dei rituali, che utilizziamo per integrare questa conoscenza nella nostra vita quotidiana, anche nei tempi al di fuori dell'applicazione di queste pratiche. Aspetta, scusate un attimo. Poi è molto importante che non sia considerata semplicemente una credenza o come diceva mi pare il professore Bonaccorso prima, ma che è una conoscenza che insieme alle iniziazioni e le trasmissioni di questa conoscenza da chi già ha questa conoscenza, attraverso come dire, la grazia che ci viene elargita dalle persone che hanno questa conoscenza, praticando i rituali, eseguendo le preghiere. Questi sono tutti modi che si trovano poi anche nelle altre religioni. Non ci dobbiamo bloccare o fermare nel parlare sempre della differenza tra le religioni. La mia religione ha queste idee, la tua religione ha queste altre idee, ma piuttosto cercare quello che è essenziale nella religione stessa. Certo è sempre utile definire, per esempio io parlo Khenpo parla della sua religione, nel senso quello che dice il Burn, ma non si deve perdere di vista quello che è essenziale nella religione, quello che ci può, che distingue o che è un fattore, una distinzione dell'essenziale identità della religione stessa. Ed è questo che applicato nelle diverse modalità che le diverse religioni insegnano, che ci porta alla pace e della felicità. Ed è per questo anche capendo come viene applicato in diverse religioni che ho trovato molto utile questo convegno, questa conferenza.
Miriam?
Sì, veramente.
A couple of comments, because you have already said it all. I completely agree with what Diana said. I'll apply that
Anche alla mia
to my daily practice in Judaism, but in general as a person.
E sicuramente appunto
of course, there are not easy solutions. There is not the recipe for happiness. There is this is not what we have to look in these cultures and the religious. It's actually all about hard work, day by day, hour by hour, continuing to try, continuing to accept one's failures, our failures, people's failures. So in my opinion, it's only through hard work, it's a daily exercise that we need to carry out, taking the step forward. And I hope this joy that we all know, the joy that happens when, yes, that time when we say, okay, I keep myself calm, I don't respond. Small victories, everyday victories that make our life dignified, as Diana said. If it was all about being in traffic, arguing with people in our old building, no. But there is that time when you are able to not answer back. That makes all worth it. And I feel this is part of my tradition, this subtle boundary that I call midras, between looking from the outside, non-fanatism, not the opposite of excess extremism, disability, that I try to show you in my interpretation of text, interpretation of life, thinking that things are, yes, one way, but also so many other ways. The 70 faces of Torah, the teaching, the Bible, but we could apply that to teaching in general. Torah has 70 faces, but it's not actually the Torah, but it's the number used by ancient people because it's infinite faces looking at the teachings. Our skills, our abilities are infinite. Every person that is born creates a new possibility of meaning. So I think that this could be the true inner disarmament, the ability to remember there's always a distance between me and this thing, and the other person has their own voice and possibilities. This is what we learn from God. The gift of Torah happens on Sinai Mount. Moses goes up to the mountain, the highest mountain for humans. Sinai mountain is actually not very high. So Moses goes up and God goes down. There is this emptiness. There's this wonderful painting from Chagall depicting what I'm saying. God letting the Torah go, and an emptiness is created, a distance, because in this way humankind is not crushed by revelation. Humanity can decide what and how to welcome. And this distance is this emptiness is our disarmament, the possibility for peace with ourselves and others.
Tamateleya samsuji shubayina. Any Ngaratun Zampling Dinalia Chulu Seti ki mi ki Jiso Nalolia, Shujin Shivuji Unijiris. Dinisa Tata Partunga Zampling Dinalia Chulu Chi Seti Suji Giorgio Yomare, Mombalatin Yumares. Dinisa Nazo Jitin Dinalia Chulu Kanga Yamde Mentone Dosjene Negu Yores. Dinisa Angazo Chulu Pensui Palaya, Pilam Chiete, Bekechambores.
I would like to say what I think, my reflections at the end of this conference. In the world, there are many religions. We talk about the religions of the world, and these are things that have really a true influence on persons. And therefore, since it is impossible to talk about having just one religion, thinking that in the future there will only be, or in the near future, there will be one religion, it's impossible. And therefore, what we should do, the only thing we can do, is to ensure that we are well together, that all these religions are in harmony with one another, and that therefore there will be no problems with one another, and that they will be in a harmonious relationship. I think this is very important.
Chulu Seti Tangaso Zambulia Castorita Milia Pentor Chik Pempi Chuluchi Red Ordinea Chulu Latene Mama Bujeri Chulu Latene Maso Chori Etan any Yoramambuchi Suyores Dinsa Naso Chulu Samalo Chichilia Tulam Cheta Chu Seti any Kanda Menashi Kasan Shubanaji Chulu Chu Seti Kanda Pentoji Yobata any Narazo Metsama Dewa Dobata Dungen Mendoba Sama Chijuimba. So what they do Nuabu Chibuimba, Chu Tamji de Dujaso la Dode, Kanda Mambuchilia Penguyoba, Dushi de Tone, and Chulu Kanga Tulamta, Chigichilia, Tana Jangue de Kitchembures and Goodos.
So these religions, all religions in the world, are benefit human beings. However, there are many wars, many attitudes of sectarianism, factions, divisions between religions. And this is something we should absolutely avoid and try to reduce as much as possible. And so it is important, as was said yesterday, to see religions as medicines that are different according to the different ailments. We should see these religions as all as something that is beneficial to others, especially based on the fact that we all want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. In this, we are all the same. because religions offers us methods not to suffer and to be happy. And therefore, these religions should be seen as something that is positive and brings benefits to all, and they all bring benefits. So we must try as much as possible to have a pure vision, a good vision towards the religions. We should train ourselves, train to have a pure outview and understanding of all religions.
Bismillah, rapidamente anche
a few words, just to honor the words of the Master Gelek. Yesterday, Adalberto, talking about the prayer of the heart in the Orthodox world, there was this emphasis on incessant prayer. And the masters of Islam help us in this, because according to a specific tradition, the Prophet says, when you are not in a very good state, you should not be careful in approaching the prayer, because it's not a game. But then there is another aspect of the prayer that says that the Prophet says, do pray, because you might change, your state might change. And in this dynamic, we practice the ways and the methods that the religion taught us. And if God wills, we change. Things do change. The lives convert, meaning that they converge in one point. They come together. And all our life means it becomes incessant prayer. However, this requires practice, the practice of rites, as was mentioned before also by Professor Bonaccorso. It requires right, and if God willing, our hearts change, but we must make this offering of adhesion of the heart, of incessant prayer. I think this is enough, and I thank you all. Fine, we have reached the conclusion of our 2 days meeting. I want to thank wholeheartedly all the speakers for having accepted our invitation, having shared with us their deep knowledge and wisdom. And naturally, I would like to thank the audience, those in presence, those online. There were many people who followed us, in fact, connected via Zoom. So finally, I would like to thank Asia, Linda, Roberta, and Kunga, who worked incessantly, in fact, to organize this conference, the AMECO, that immediately Corrado, Penza, and Neva have offered us this hall at the moment when medical was no longer possible with medical. And behind the scenes, let us not forget all the work of the translators, Davide, Andy, and Maria Teresa and Eva, that we did not see, but who were connected online. And finally, I would like to thank Lubi, who helped us financially to organize not only this conference, but the entire project that we carried out in this long year. So thank you wholeheartedly to all of you. Also to all the IT technicians and experts, and I would also like to thank them. An event that takes place hybrid and online and in presence mode is not always easy, and I must thank them because everything worked very smoothly, really.